Little did they know what kind of situation would unfold. And frankly, it's still very hard to believe what's really happened here today. It's still very hard to believe what's really happened here today.
Interestingly, she was the one of the few leading candidates for this who's not currently working for the Met. She is working for the Foreign Office, technically. That's the technical phrase, but I think most people think that she is probably doing something involving working with the security services. But I think it's her terrorism experience that will be very valuable. It has to be one of the top challenges for the police, the risk of a serious terrorist attack, a marauding attack, as it's often described. Somebody with a gun taking to the streets of London is something the Met is very much training to deal with. One of the issues that Cressida Dick will have to deal with is a concern that there might not be enough officers willing to carry a gun, it's not compulsory, for the Metropolitan Police, because officers involved in shootings tend to get criticised and even investigated by the authorities for their role.
What I'm concerned about is anyone that may wish to attack us again, and I'm sure it will happen. We predicted this would happen. What about all the other major cities where sometimes armed backup could be 10 or 20 minutes away? Now, it's all right London being well protected, and I think this will certainly make many police officers do not want to be armed, that will now reconsider wanting to be armed, and I think that will be one of the priorities for the Metropolitan Commission and the Home Secretary.
She's been at the heart of some very big inquiries for the Met already.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the most difficult things the Met has dealt with. Now, Cressida Dick was the commander of that operation, so she was in the control room, hearing all the information coming in from the teams on the ground, her decisions being written down by somebody stood next to her, and she gave the command to stop the man that they were following, the man who turned out to be Jean-Charles de Menezes. And she has always said, stop, not shoot. But he was shot dead on the tube, and that was one of the Met's darkest days.
I think it's a good verdict actually, because I think the police basically they were out of order basically.
There's people on the platforms, there's people on the trains. Nobody's heard anything from any of those. Nobody's seen anything of those people, and there was no need to have shot him so many times. That was totally above the call of duty.
It's up to the jury to decide, but I think it is good that the police are accountable for their actions.
Cressida Dick's appointment is not without controversy. 12 years ago, she oversaw the flawed police operation that led to the death of Brazilian electrician Jean-Charles de Menezes, mistaken for a suicide bomber and shot by armed police inside a London tube station. The Menezes family have released a statement expressing their serious concern at the appointment. They say at the helm of the police on that fateful day when Jean was killed was Cressida Dick. The message of today's appointment is that police officers can act with impunity.
Request from Commander Cressida Dick for a percentage likeness to Hussein Osman, a question one surveillance team leader described as ridiculous. There was no reply. Every special branch officer who gave evidence denies ever saying it was definitely him.
Leaving court today, the commander in charge that day, Cressida Dick. The judge said she was given misleading information. The jury asked she should not be personally blamed for what happened. The Met Police are guilty, but its officers walked free.
Public confidence in the police needs to be earned, and this can only be done by demonstrably showing that there have been changes to police operations, but also to police accountability. And we strongly feel that by bestowing medals and promotions to the officers that were involved in Jean Charles's killing makes a mockery of any real commitment to that process.
Her actions on that day were scrutinised in great detail during an Old Bailey health and safety prosecution and at a public inquest. But in a rare move, the Old Bailey jury ruled against the Met. But said Miss Dick should be absolved of any personal culpability.
Not only for the family of Jean-Charles de Menezes, but also for many, many campaigners and community groups. She'll always be linked with that particular spectacular mistake by the Met, shooting a totally innocent man.
But one former Home Secretary said any move to block the appointment would have been completely wrong.
It would be absolutely outrageous. And if that was used against Cressida Dick, it would send out a message that it is basically impossible to get anybody to head up major police forces except time servers who've kept their nose clean and never taken a risk.
The Met had to deal with the phone hacking inquiry where it was accused and there were resignations because it hadn't tackled its links to the press in particular, its close links with the press. She was involved in putting forward changes to the Metropolitan Police recommended by the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, which came after the death of Stephen Lawrence, the teenager.
And it should be noted, Rohit, that we are in a period of handover between the former head of the Metropolitan Police and the new head of the Met, Cressida Dick.
Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe has done his last day in the office. Cressida Dick is now in charge, and frankly this is the greatest possible challenge that could face any Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and it is one that the entire operation at Scotland Yard is trying to face this afternoon.
A court heard he'd locked himself in the car while witnessing the murder of one of his own officers before leaving the scene. He told the jury the attack happened just as he was being driven out of the Palace of Westminster after a ministerial meeting.
Shot him, bloke was running with a knife. He shot him. Police was trying to get him, he came running down there. They're getting on with something.
At the time, the two armed officers on duty were on the other side of the yard at the colonnade.
The court heard hours of evidence about why they were there at the colonnade and not at the main gates, known as carriage gates. The firearms officers said they had been told quite clearly to be at the members' entrance in the colonnade on Wednesdays, the day of Prime Minister's questions. But a series of senior officers contradicted that evidence.
The coroner has ruled it's possible PC Palmer's death could have been prevented if armed officers had been at the gates.
Okay, I'm reloading. You think you're big time? I'll show you big time. What?
You reckon I would get in trouble if I shot you with the Nerf? How much trouble?
Huh?
A lot.
We're not going to play that game now, are we?
Or can I just try?
No.
I'm just curious though.
No.
Just a bit curious. About there.
Yeah, jump on. Go on, off you go.
One more?
Go on, off you go.
Is it not worth it? Alright, cool. Alright, can I get my bullet? No? Oh, okay.
Taking place, and I can't emphasize enough how much security is part of this place. You know, on a normal working day, you might walk past armed police, maybe on a dozen occasions, perhaps more. So the sense of shock that finally something like this has taken place here, of all places, is profound.
There's an area called Carriage Gates, which is normally closed to the public. You can only get in with a security pass. There's always armed police on the gates there. There's always armed police on the gates there. But someone rushed through that, got through the security gates and assaulted a policeman.
After hearing Masood being shot by an armed officer, Sir Craig told the jury, "First and foremost, I was a police officer, so I went to open the door to get out." One of the PCs quite rightfully said, "Get out, make safe, go, shut the door." One of the PCs quite rightfully said, "Get out, make safe, go, shut the door." I had no personal protective equipment, no radio, 2 colleagues with me who were quite traumatised by what they had seen, so we moved out, and I began coordinating the response you saw.
His actions that day were utterly unforgivable. You know, a police officer's natural instinct, when you see a colleague being stabbed, is to get out and help him, first and foremost, always, unmistakably. That is what you do. Policing is a family.
You will also be aware that I personally was a witness to yesterday's events, part of yesterday's events, including part of the tragic attack on PC Palmer. As with all police officers, I therefore had a duty to secure my evidence and produce statements yesterday evening, which I did before resuming my role leading our response to this incident.
But 2 days ago, it was the attacker who crashed his car on the other side of that fence, came around the corner and went through this gate, stabbed and killed a policeman, and then was shot dead. Again, today, a lot of security, a lot of tourists, and a lot of traffic. All the roads around this building open today. The UK open for business.
To the edge of the police cordon and down the road of the Palace of Westminster, we are just hearing that MPs and peers have been leaving the Palace of Westminster.
Im Westminster Viertel patrouillieren Sicherheitskräfte, durchsuchen das Parlamentsgebäude, bringen Abgeordnete ins... Im Westminster Viertel patrouillieren Sicherheitskräfte, durchsuchen das Parlamentsgebäude, bringen Abgeordnete.
British people will be united in working together to defeat those who would harm our shared values. Values of democracy, tolerance, and the rule of law. Values symbolised by the Houses of Parliament. Values that will never be destroyed.
Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, the Home Secretary told us the deportation of Abu Qatada was underway. On Wednesday, it stopped. On Tuesday, she told us there would be no appeal to the Grand Chamber. On Wednesday, an appeal was underway. Yesterday, the Home Office said the appeal deadline was Monday night, but the European Court officials said it was Tuesday night. So on the Tuesday night deadline, while Abu Qatada was appealing to European Court judges, the Home Secretary, who thought the deadline was Monday night, was partying with X-Factor judges. When the Home Secretary is accused of not knowing what day of the week it is, then confusion and chaos has turned into farce. This farce has serious consequences. Additional delays, a greater risk Abu Qatada will be put out on bail, and a risk he will sue the government. So, did the Home Office get specific assurances from the European Court the deadline was Monday night? If so, will they publish them? If not, why not? Why did they not pick up the phone to sort it out? Exactly. The Home Office was told by journalists on Monday, nearly 24 hours before Abu Qatada was arrested, that the European Court officials were saying the deadline was Tuesday. Did they do anything about it? I hope her interpretation is right, but at best there is uncertainty, and several eminent lawyers are now saying that they agree with the European Court. So why take the risk? What was the harm in waiting until Wednesday? Exactly. Why create a legal loophole for Abu Qatada's lawyers to exploit? We all want Abu Qatada to be deported as soon as possible under the rule of law and kept off the streets in the meantime. But both those things are now less likely because of her actions. On Tuesday, I warned that there was a troubling level of confusion around this case. Even I did not imagine the confusion was this great. When will this Home Secretary sort this out?
Startling revelations about the cleric's dealings with the security services are contained in this document, SIAC's judgment justifying the continued detention of Abu Qatada in Belmarsh prison under the emergency anti-terrorism laws. Much of that hearing took place in secret in a basement chamber in the building behind me. But information from this judgment has emerged that clearly shows how MI5 acknowledged the extensive influence of Abu Qatada and how it might help keep terrorism off the streets of the United Kingdom.
Now, Moazzam Begg became famous when he was locked up by the Americans in Guantanamo more than 10 years ago. But this year, he spent months in jail on terror charges after returning from Syria. The case against him suddenly collapsed on Wednesday after MI5 handed over a series of documents. They apparently back up Mr. Begg's claims that MI5 knew about his trip to Syria. And he insists the security services promised he would not be prevented from going. Our Home Affairs correspondent Darshna Soni has spoken exclusively to Moazzam Begg, and she joins us now from Birmingham. Darshna.
Did MI5 withhold vital information from the police and prosecutors about what they knew about Moazzam Begg's activities in Syria? Sources here tonight, Krishnan, say the West Midlands Force and prosecutors are furious about the late disclosure. And they say had they known about MI5's dealings with the former Guantanamo detainee before he was arrested, then he may never have been charged.
Well, look, I've just been imprisoned for 7 months. I've been interrogated, I've been questioned, I've had the entire weight of the British establishment, which includes all of its arms, from the prison service to the police service to the intelligence services to the Home Office, Home Office. And prior to that, I was imprisoned in Bagram and Guantanamo. I was interrogated by the CIA, by the FBI, by the MI5, by military intelligence. I'm probably one of the most scrutinized people in the world.
We did put Moizzam Beg's claims to the Home Office but didn't receive a response.
Here at MI5, the spooks face their biggest crisis in years. Apparently called liars, people who collude in torture, who don't tell Parliament the truth. And not by some bunch of woolly-minded do-gooders, but by the country's leading judges. It's serious, and today it's gone very public. Because this morning, the MI5 boss, Jonathan Evans, fought back in the Daily Telegraph. MI5 bosses simply don't do this.
Abu Hamza may be known best for his incendiary speeches outside the Finsbury Park Mosque. But his defence lawyer is claiming that during these years, the Egyptian-born cleric was actually in a dialogue with MI5, trying not to inflame, but to contain the more radical elements among his followers.
Today there is more terrorist activity. It's coming at us more quickly, and it can be harder to detect. I said in my Mansion House speech 2 years ago that I feared that even after a string of successful disruptions, we had not yet reached the high watermark. Sadly, that's proved to be the case.
Every time I hear that Barber's been released or he was on bail for 2 years and so has been wandering the streets of America free, in fact I hear that he's now married with children himself, fills me with anger because it points to complicity with the American Secret Service in his role in Pakistan. And that suggests then that whilst Barber was running the training camps, training people to commit mass murder, that was with the full knowledge of the American Secret Service. Doesn't diminish what he did. He was directly responsible for the deaths of dozens and dozens of people, and 4.5 years is totally inappropriate. If you look at our system, for example, you get more than that for some motoring offences. Certainly you can get more than that for burglary without injuring a single person. So to be responsible for the deaths of 52 people, serve 4.5 years and be released is just, and say that means he's paid his debt to society, just beggars belief. If he was running those training camps with the knowledge of the American Secret Service, it's inconceivable he wasn't passing information of people who were attending those camps to the Americans. So that then begs the question, why didn't the Americans tell the MI5? Or if they did tell MI5, why wasn't something done?
The Intelligence and Security Committee is most scathing about MI6. The agency's lack of interest in Adebolajo after he was arrested in Kenya, the committee found deeply unsatisfactory. And MI6's role in combating jihadi terrorism amounted, the committee found, to doing practically nothing in his case.
That look, basically what's happened, I went to study in Kenya, and you know, when I got to Kenya, in a particular village, we were rounded up by Kenyan troops basically, and we were taken to basically a prison cell, okay, and we were all interrogated one by one, and it said that basically when my turn came, basically I didn't speak to them, obviously because generally like here you say no comment and so forth, so I wouldn't accept, you know, to speak to them. And he said that basically the officer said, you're not in the UK. He said basically, you know, taking his private part side, he said, I'll F you, basically, if you don't speak.
Did he tell you that he was physically and sexually assaulted?
He told me he was physically assaulted. He told me he was sexually threatened, and he indicated, from what I know of him, when he said I couldn't, you know, I feel ashamed to tell you what happened to me. As far as I understand that, you know, it's sexual abuse, because there's nothing he will feel shy to tell me about except that. He was holding tears back, basically, when he was mentioning it.
So your judgment is that he had quite a profound change of personality after that?
Definitely, he just became, it's almost like he just, his mind was somewhere else, but his, you know, his presence was, you know, was there, basically. On his return back, he had been stopped. And subsequently after that, basically, he was followed up by MI5. You know, he said they came to his house. You know, they were saying, knocking on his door. He pretended that he wasn't there, but they were knocking so much, he thought to himself, like, look, you know what, I need to kind of like, you know, come and show my face.
He felt that the MI5 were, you know, destroying his life, that his life, as he knew it was over, they had no control over his own future.
We've seen this pattern so many times over and over again. You know, had I not spoken to hundreds of people who had been in exactly the same situation, fine, maybe I might say, I can't really say either way. But in this situation, every single thing he's described is exactly as we've heard it before.
And what was his reaction to being approached by the security service MI5?
His wording was, Ak means brother, they're bugging me, like they just keep, they won't leave me alone, basically. Initially, they wanted to ask him whether he knew certain individuals, basically. After him saying that he didn't know these individuals and so forth, what he said is they asked him whether he'll be interested in working for them.
Did he give any indication to you that he was capable of such horrific violence?
It didn't make sense because his whole concept, was he just wanted to go and live in the Muslim land, basically.
The Muslims are over 2 billion around the world.
Between 2012 and 2016, Masood was in contact with al-Muhajiroon supporters who were being actively investigated by MI5, and he expressed support for 9/11. But MI5 has said that neither of these facts warranted reopening its investigation into him. But security sources have told Newsnight that Masood was associating with extremists in Luton. Once again, he was picked up on MI5's radar because he was in contact with these men who were convicted of plotting a terrorist attack on a territorial army base in the town.
Basically, half an hour ago, just before it happened, I was on the bridge and we were walking about and family, they said we'll go get something to eat. But, so we went to get something to eat and we got the news that something's happened and we were shocked. No, we didn't see it. We were away from the...
You were in the restaurant?
We were in the restaurant having something to eat and when it happened.
Can I keep your name?
It's Osman. Osman.
The words of Theresa May, who earlier this year on so-called Holocaust Memorial Day said that, we must never forget where prejudice can lead. And she also said that by supporting Holocaust education, we'll safeguard the memories of survivors and learn the lessons for generations to come. Now, there's a reason why I mention these. Because right now, Theresa May and the British government are complicit in a Holocaust in Yemen. You could call it many things. Some people might say Holocaust is too difficult to word, but it's a mass genocide of people in Yemen. It's premeditated and it's with intent. It's not accidental. And the British government is complicit, and that's why they give their man their man occupying Arabia the red carpet treatment. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised by the treatment he got. I applaud and I salute those people who came out today to protest, and anyone who's been protesting against this war criminal, because a time will come, not too long, where Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and all of these people who have been promoting and supporting bin Salman and the Zionists in their genocide on Yemen, their Holocaust on Yemen, where they'll be taken to a court like the one in Nuremberg, and they will be, put behind bars for eternity.
His administration later clarified that while the US no longer sees Israeli settlements as an obstacle to peace, it does not consider them helpful either. Theresa May, for her part, went as far as scolding former Secretary of State John Kerry for a speech criticizing Israeli policy. Israel saw this as a welcome change of tone. The US has always been its closest ally, whereas Europe has been more critical. Now Netanyahu might enjoy even stronger support from Washington and win the backing of post-Brexit Britain. In January, Britain refused to send a high-level delegation to a Middle East peace conference organized in Paris. It voiced concern that the meeting would only exacerbate tensions. It also snubbed the closing declaration by 70 countries that stressed only a two-state solution could resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Just as Britain works on its divorce from the European Union, many see in its new coziness with Trump and Israel a way to keep warm in an uncertain post-Brexit world.
The Prime Minister yesterday said she was calling a general election because Parliament was blocking Brexit. But 3/4 of MPs and 2/3 of the Lords voted for Article 50. So that's not true, is it? And a month ago, she told her official spokesman to rule out an early general election, and that wasn't true either, was it? She wants us to believe that she is a woman of her word. Isn't the truth that we cannot believe a single word? Isn't the truth that we cannot believe a single word?
Islamist extremism when there are other forms of extremism we need to tackle. But that is untrue too. We want to defeat all forms of extremism, ideological or not. And where it is driven by ideology, we draw no distinction between a neo-Nazi and an Islamist extremist. Our definition of extremism is the vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and the mutual respect and tolerance of different faiths and beliefs. And we will, through the immigration rules, require all foreign religious workers in pastoral roles to speak English. Other critics say it's all too complicated. Attitudes are too deeply ingrained, that actually what we regard as extreme, lots of people find quite appealing, that so long as people don't turn violent, we should just put up with behaviour we don't very much like. To these critics, we must say emphatically, no. We know there is a link between non-violent extremism and violent extremism. We believe in democracy because the alternative leads to the arbitrary abuse of power. We will deny extremists the opportunity to spread their messages of hate by introducing banning orders for extremist groups that fall short of existing terrorist prescription thresholds. We believe in equality because the alternative is discrimination and suffering. We will require police forces to record anti-Muslim crimes as well as anti-Semitic crimes. We plan a step change in the way we help people to learn the English language. There will be new incentives and penalties, a sharp reduction in funding for translation services, and a significant increase in the funding available for English language training. We will introduce extremism disruption orders, civil powers to be used against individual extremists who incite hatred. We will bring in new powers for whistleblowers and a new extremism community trigger. We will therefore develop a positive campaign to promote British values and show clearly the opportunities they bring. We will be more proactive in helping people from all backgrounds understand the values that drive our foreign policy and international aid work.
Isn't the truth that we cannot believe a single word?